Hey everybody, it's Lynnea here for LDRS Creative, and today we're going to do a little bit of watercoloring. I have the Corner Garden stamp set, and that's what I'm going to be coloring today. I'm using the LDRS Creative watercolor cardstock. It's cut down to A2 size, and I'm just going to stamp both of these images from the Corner Garden stamp set in Raven Hybrid ink. And since I'm doing watercoloring, I am going to be doing some heat embossing too. I find that it's easiest to watercolor when I have those raised edges to help contain my color. And the hybrid inks stay wet for just a little bit. You won't really notice it when you stamp. I've never had my hybrid inks smear if I was to run my hand over them, but hybrid inks are a mix of dye and pigment ink, so they dry to the touch pretty quickly, but they still stay a little bit wet, so you can do things like heat embossing if you work quickly. So I stamped in Raven Hybrid ink, and then I heat embossed quickly with clear embossing powder to create those kind of raised edges on my stamps. I am watercoloring today with Shimmer watercolors. You can use any kind of watercolors that you have in your craft room, so they don't have to be the Shimmer ones. I just thought that it would be a nice touch to have an extra bit of sparkle in my watercoloring. But you could even use watercolor pencils or markers, or like the Korean markers. Anything will work for today's coloring technique. And I'm just going to show you the basic ways that I watercolor. So here's one way that I watercolor with the wet on wet, where I will go through and I'll wet the floral image and then drop in some color. Here I'm dropping in just some light pink, and then I'm going to go in and add some darker pink closer towards the center. And you can see here how the water does most of the work. The water is working that color out towards the edge. And then when I come in with a lighter color for the tip of the petals, again, that water is doing the work, and it's going to blend those colors for me without much effort at all. You will see me sometimes coloring wet on dry, and that's when I will make sure that my watercolors are good and wet. Like here, this is wet on dry. I have a lot of water in my color, but none on my flower, so I'm coloring on dry cardstock. And I am coming in with a dark blue, like an ultramarine blue color, towards the center of each of the petals. And then I'll come in with a light green, kind of like a seafoam green color on the outer edge of the petals. And I'm not going to let these colors touch quite yet. So I have dark blue at the bottom, seafoam green at the top. And then what I'll do is I'll come in with some water and blend these two colors together. You can see me here starting to work those colors together. And that's going to give me some fun effects. And when it dries, you're going to see these colors shift from like a green to a blue, and that's because I'm mixing these colors together, and it just brings a lot of dimension. You can do this with any other kind of watercolor that you have, even with markers. If you put a dark color at the center and a light color towards the tip, and then use just a little bit of water to blend them together, you'll get a similar effect. It's nice for flowers because I feel like in nature, flowers, even a blue flower, has multi-tones to it. So here are my finished Corner Garden colored images. I dried them with my heat tool just to make sure they were completely dry, and now I'm going to die cut them. So I'm taking the Corner Garden coordinating die set, running that through my die cutting machine, and now I'm going to create a pretty background for my floral images. This is the Mosaic A2 cover plate die. It's one of my favorite cover plate dies from LDRS Creative, and I am just taping a piece of A2 piece cardstock, taping that at the top and the bottom, and then I'm just going to run this through my die cutting machine. All that's left now is to start assembling my card. My sentiment is from the Garden Grandeur Slimline stamp set. This has some of my favorite stamp sets or sentiments in the stamp set because I love the mix of the print and script fonts. Now I arranged my images from the Corner Garden stamp set onto my Mosaic cover plate background, and I taped them in place with a piece of masking tape, and then from the back I squeezed out some glue and glued those pieces together so that I wouldn't lose their placement. That's just a handy little trick that I use all the time. Here's another one. I wanted to pop up my Mosaic A2 cover plate background with foam tape, but I hate cutting down little pieces of foam tape. It was tedious enough for me to cut strips down to go along the outer edges, and I really didn't want to cut a million little pieces to help stabilize this large background. So what I did was I glued my corner garden images onto the front, and then I'm going to hide my foam adhesive behind those floral images to stabilize the center of my background die, and nobody will ever know. All that's left to do now is to just put that sentiment right in the center of my floral cluster with some foam tape, and this card is done. It's a relatively simple card, but I think that Shimmer watercolor really brings a lot of life and something extra special to the card. Thanks so much for joining me. I will see you again very soon in another video. Bye! Thank you again very much for watching this video. If you liked this video and you'd like to see more from me, please hit that subscribe button that is on the screen now. And here are a few other videos that I thought you might enjoy.